They sold an Apache girl like an animal, until a kind rancher changed her life forever. She was very young when her world broke apart, though she did not know her exact age. In her tribe, time was counted by seasons, not numbers. She only knew that she had lived long enough to remember her mother's voice, the smell of cooking fires at dusk, and the feeling of safety when elders told stories under the open sky. Those memories were the only warm things she carried inside her after everything else was taken away. The day her life changed began like any other. The sun rose slowly over the land, painting the hills in soft gold. She had been helping collect water, her bare feet familiar with the dust and stones. Laughter echoed nearby. For a brief moment, life felt normal. Then unfamiliar sounds shattered the calm. Loud voices, rough movements. Panic spread faster than fire. She did not understand what was happening. People ran. Someone shouted her name, but the sound was swallowed by chaos. Strong hands grabbed her arm. She struggled, confused and terrified, but she was small, and fear made her weak. In a blur of dust and noise, she was pulled away from everything she had ever known. The journey that followed felt endless. She was taken far from her land, her language, her people. No one explained anything to her. The words spoken around her meant nothing, yet their tone was clear enough. She was no longer seen as a person. She was treated like something that could be owned. Days blended together. She slept on cold ground or hard floors, wherever they decided to leave her. Food came without kindness, sometimes late, sometimes barely enough. When she cried quietly at night, no one listened. When she stayed silent, no one noticed. Silence slowly became her shield. She learned quickly that asking questions only brought trouble. Her eyes stayed lowered, her shoulders bent forward, as if making herself smaller could protect her. Inside, fear lived constantly, but she buried it deep. Showing emotion felt dangerous. She was moved from place to place, each one colder than the last. People looked at her the way they looked at tools or animals, judging usefulness, not feelings. Some spoke loudly about her as if she could not hear. Others ignored her completely. Both hurt in different ways. At one stop, she was made to stand in a crowded space. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and animals. Strange sounds filled her ears. Metal clanging, men shouting numbers. Laughter without joy. She didn't know where she was, but she felt exposed. Eyes followed her movements, some curious, some careless, some unkind. She hugged her arms around herself, trying to disappear. Her clothes were thin, worn from travel. Her hair was tangled. She felt dirty, not from the dust, but from the way people looked at her. She remembered how her mother used to brush her hair gently and felt a sharp pain in her chest. No one spoke to her directly. They spoke over her, about her. Words she didn't understand were paired with gestures that made her stomach twist. She sensed that something important was happening, something she had no control over. That feeling, being powerless, was the hardest to bear. As time passed, hope became fragile. At first, she believed someone would come for her. Maybe her people were searching. Maybe this was all a mistake. But days turned into weeks, and no familiar face appeared. The world she knew felt like a dream that faded each time she tried to remember it clearly. She began to forget her own voice. When was the last time she had spoken freely? When was the last time someone asked her how she felt? Her thoughts stayed inside, unshared, growing heavy. Loneliness wrapped around her tighter than chains ever could. Yet even in that darkness, something inside her refused to disappear completely. It was small, quiet, but alive. A memory of kindness, a belief that life was not meant to be this way. She didn't have words for it, but she felt it deep in her chest. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long, she was taken to another unfamiliar place. This one was louder, busier. Animals moved nervously nearby. People gathered, exchanging money, shaking hands. The ground vibrated with movement. Her heart beat fast. She was placed near a wooden fence and told to stay. She did. Obedience had become survival. She stared at the dirt beneath her feet, counting cracks and pebbles to calm her shaking hands. From time to time, someone stopped and looked at her. Most saw nothing more than a problem or a price. They turned away quickly. Each time that happened, a strange mix of relief and sadness washed over her. Relief that they didn't choose her. Sadness that no one cared enough to see her pain. She wondered if this was how her life would always be. Moved around, spoken about, never spoken to. The future felt like a closed door she could not open. As the day wore on, exhaustion settled into her bones. Hunger made her dizzy. She leaned slightly against the fence, hoping no one would notice her weakness. Showing pain felt risky. That was when she sensed something different. A pair of eyes rested on her, longer than the others had. Not sharp, not careless, steady. Curious in a quiet way, she did not look up immediately. Experience had taught her caution, but she felt it. Attention without cruelty. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Across the space stood a man. Unlike the rest, he was not loud. He did not laugh or point. His clothes were simple, worn from honest work. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes carried weight. He wasn't looking at her like an object. He was looking at her like a person. The moment unsettled her. She didn't know how to react. Part of her wanted to look away, to hide again. Another part, one she thought was gone, felt a tiny spark of something unfamiliar. Hope. She did not know who he was. She did not know what would happen next. But for the first time since her world fell apart, someone saw her not as something to be used, but as someone who existed. And that single moment, small and quiet, planted the first seed of change in a life that had almost forgotten what kindness felt like. The rancher had been at the livestock auction for most of the morning. He had come to sell a few cattle and check on supplies, not expecting anything unusual. The sounds of the crowd, voices shouting, animals moving, the clanging of metal, had become something he could almost ignore. Yet among all the noise and motion, something caught his attention, pulling him out of the routine hum of the auction. She stood by the wooden fence, small and silent, with a sadness that seemed too heavy for one so young. Most people looked past her, seeing only a girl who was there to be sold, another item on a long list of transactions. But he didn't. The rancher's eyes lingered, studying her from a distance. There was something in the way she held herself, fragile yet careful, that made him pause. He noticed the way her hands fidgeted, twisting the hem of her clothes. She did not look at anyone directly, and when someone approached her, she shrank back as if the very act of being seen was dangerous. The rancher remembered moments from his own life, the fear of being misunderstood, the loneliness that came from being ignored. In her posture, he recognized something he had known before, a quiet, invisible pain that could not be hidden completely, no matter how much one tried. Others around him laughed, argued, and made deals. They offered her small smiles, short words, and sometimes no attention at all. Some even joked about the idea of purchasing a child, and their laughter was sharp and cold. Yet he could see past that surface. He realized this girl had been through more than anyone could imagine. She was not meant to live this way. No one was. The rancher did not act immediately. He observed quietly, learning as much as he could from a distance. He watched how she reacted to people, how she flinched at sudden movements, and how her eyes darted to the ground whenever someone spoke too loudly. He noted the small ways she tried to care for herself, smoothing her hair or adjusting her clothes, almost as if she could pretend to belong to the world if she performed just right. It broke something inside him to see such resilience paired with such deep fear. As the morning went on, he moved closer, keeping his voice calm and soft. "Hello," he said simply, not expecting a response. She looked up briefly, startled, then lowered her eyes again. The rancher continued to speak in small phrases, offering words that were easy to understand. He did not ask questions that could frighten her. He did not make demands. Instead, he introduced himself, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he let her know that she was not in danger with him. This was a new experience for her. Until now, people had only been loud, rough, or absent. To hear someone speak gently, without anger or expectation, was strange. She wanted to look away, to pretend he did not exist, but something in his tone, something calm and steady, made her hesitate. She sensed that he might be different, that perhaps he was someone who could see her as more than what the world had told her she was. The auction continued around them. People called out bids, bargained, and moved from one pen to the next, yet in that small corner of the space, time seemed to slow. The rancher kept his attention on her, observing carefully, giving her space while still being present. He understood that trust could not be forced. It had to be earned, step by step. Eventually, he made his way to the auctioneer and asked quietly about her situation. The auctioneer gave him a shrug and explained in casual terms what others already assumed. She had been traded and moved from family to family, sold for work or profit, treated as property instead of a human being. The rancher's heart tightened at every word. It was impossible to imagine the life she had endured, yet he could see its impact in the way she held herself. After listening, he returned to her side. He offered her food and water, simple acts of kindness that she had probably not experienced in a long time. She hesitated, unsure if it was safe to accept. But hunger is a powerful teacher. Slowly, she reached for what he offered. The act was small, almost invisible to those around them, yet it marked the first moment in a long time that someone had thought of her needs before their own convenience. From there, he began to create small routines, introducing her to kindness in ways that did not overwhelm her. He did not ask her to speak immediately. He did not demand obedience. He offered her choices where possible, whether to sit in the sun or the shade, whether to eat now or later, whether to stay close or observe from a distance. These small acts of autonomy were foreign to her, but they were also freeing. She began to understand that this man did not intend to hurt her, nor to use her as others had. Over the next few days, he continued to watch her closely, learning her habits, her fears, and her little victories. Each small gesture became part of a pattern of safety, respect, and patience. He began to speak to her in simple sentences, repeating the same words so she could begin to understand them. Slowly, she started to respond. A nod here, a hesitant smile there. Each moment, though tiny, built a bridge between her past of fear and a future where she might feel safe. It was not an easy process. At times she recoiled, remembering pain and betrayal. Sometimes she ran and hid, thinking she had no right to be noticed. But the rancher never forced her. He learned to be patient, to accept setbacks, and to keep returning with calm consistency. His presence became a steadying force in her life, a proof that not everyone saw her as an object. Evenings were the hardest. The noise of the auction would fade, but the memories of the day clung to her. She often sat quietly, staring at the ground or tracing patterns in the dirt. The rancher would sometimes sit nearby, not speaking, just being there. Over time, she began to sense his care. She did not know how to explain it or name it, but she felt a small flicker of trust growing inside her. One morning he offered her a soft blanket to sit on while the sun rose. She did not understand the act fully at first, but she accepted it. She began to notice small details, the warmth of the blanket, the gentle way he spoke to her, the absence of harsh words. For the first time in a long while, she felt a tiny sense of comfort. It was not complete safety. Not yet, but it was a start. The rancher also noticed her intelligence and curiosity. Though her world had been cruel, she had learned to observe, to notice patterns, to survive in ways that were subtle but clever. He encouraged these skills in small ways, allowing her to help with chores, asking her opinion on simple matters, listening when she chose to speak. Her confidence grew slowly, like a flower pushing through stone, fragile yet determined. In the midst of this, he also understood the challenges ahead. The world outside the auction would not be kind to her. Prejudice, misunderstanding, and cruelty were everywhere. But he decided that he would be the one constant she could rely on. He would not pretend to erase her past, but he could provide a space where she could begin to heal. And so, over the following weeks, the girl began to change in ways almost imperceptible to anyone else. Her back straightened slightly, her eyes no longer darted constantly with fear. She started to speak a few words, carefully, testing whether the world could respond with kindness. Each day she became a little more herself, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she could be safe, cared for, and free to learn and grow. The rancher never called himself a hero. He did not boast or announce his intentions. He simply did what he could, guided by compassion and patience. And in return, he saw the first signs of life returning to someone who had known almost nothing but fear and loneliness. He recognized that small acts repeated with consistency could change a life in ways money, rules, or force never could. By the time the auction ended, she was no longer just a silent figure in the crowd. She had become someone he had noticed, someone he had invested in, someone whose future he would protect. And although the journey ahead was long, the first bridge had been built. A connection formed not through ownership or obligation, but through the quiet power of patience, respect, and human care. Life on the ranch was entirely new to the girl, and every day brought both small challenges and quiet lessons. She had never seen so much open land before. Hills rolled into the horizon, dotted with animals grazing calmly under the sun. The air smelled different from what she remembered, fresh, earthy, and alive. At first, all of it felt strange and overwhelming. She did not know where she could walk safely, which sounds meant danger, and which sounds were part of life. The rancher understood this. He did not rush her. He allowed her to move at her own pace, to explore small corners of the land without fear of punishment or scolding. He explained simple things in calm, clear language, which plants were safe to touch, which animals were friendly, and where she could go without worry. He never forced her to follow instructions immediately. Instead, he watched and guided, allowing her to learn through experience, always there if she faltered. At first, she kept her distance. The animals, though not threatening, startled her. Horses snorted and moved quickly, cattle shifted and mooed. She remembered how chaos had felt in the auction, and instinct told her to flee from any loud sound. Yet slowly, she began to notice patterns. The animals had routines. They did not harm her if she moved calmly. She began to imitate the way the rancher handled them, quietly learning, mimicking small gestures he showed her. One morning he gave her a small task: to help feed the chickens. She hesitated, unsure if she could do it right. But the rancher crouched nearby, showing her how to scatter the grain gently. "It's okay," he said softly. "They won't bite you. Just go slow." Her hands shook as she followed his instructions, but nothing bad happened. The animals approached, pecking gently at the food, and she realized that careful movement could prevent harm. For the first time, she felt a small measure of control, something she had not experienced in months, maybe years. The rancher also introduced her to chores in a way that respected her limits. She learned to carry buckets of water, sweep the floor of the barn, and help tend small animals. These tasks were not punishment. They were ways for her to feel useful and competent. Each small success boosted her confidence. She began to recognize that she could act in the world without fear of being hurt or punished, and that simple contributions could matter. Food became another area of connection. He always made sure she had enough to eat, and over time he invited her to help him prepare meals. She watched carefully, sometimes imitating his movements, learning to chop vegetables or stir soups. He never criticized her mistakes. Instead, he guided her gently, repeating instructions with patience. In these quiet moments, she felt her world expanding, not just the land or the animals, but her own sense of ability and worth. Communication remained difficult at first. She still spoke only in small words, unsure if her sentences would be understood. But he never forced her to speak. He listened when she tried, patiently piecing together meaning from gestures, expressions, and the few words she could manage. Slowly, she began to form sentences, simple but meaningful. "Thank you," she whispered one day after he helped her fix a broken fence post. The words were fragile but sincere, and he smiled, understanding that progress often came slowly. The rancher noticed her curiosity as well. She asked questions, not all in words, but in looks and gestures. When she pointed to a plant, he would explain what it was and how it could be used. When she gestured toward an animal, he shared information about its habits. The small exchanges built trust. She began to see that knowledge was a kind of safety. The more she understood about her environment, the less frightening it became. Evenings brought moments of quiet reflection. After a day of work, she would sit on the porch or under a tree, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The rancher often joined her, speaking softly about life on the land, about how seasons changed, and about the ways animals and humans could live together in balance. At first, she only listened, but gradually she began to respond. Small smiles appeared, then short sentences. She began to laugh softly at his gentle jokes, a sound almost foreign to the rancher because it had been so long since he had heard it. The process of building trust was not linear. Some days, memories of past pain returned like storms, sudden and overwhelming. She would flinch at loud noises, refuse to speak, or hide behind objects. The rancher never punished these reactions. He simply gave her space, waiting patiently until she felt safe again. Sometimes he would sit nearby, silent but present, offering reassurance without pressure. These actions taught her that being human meant it was okay to have fear, and that she could recover from it without shame. Friendship slowly began to grow. She learned the names of the animals and even gave some of them her own names, showing a sense of connection to her surroundings. She learned that the horses could be trusted if approached gently, that cows had moods, and that small routines could predict larger patterns on the ranch. Each day she practiced patience and observation, discovering that understanding and respect brought rewards. The rancher noticed something remarkable. Despite her past hardships, she had resilience and intelligence that shone through when given support. She solved small problems on her own, helped him anticipate needs on the ranch, and began to show initiative. He encouraged her independence carefully, offering choices that allowed her to feel capable without fear of failure. She began to understand that mistakes were not punished but were opportunities to learn. One day, a young calf had fallen into a ditch near the edge of the ranch. The girl saw it struggling and froze, unsure if she could help. The rancher came beside her and guided her, calmly explaining what to do. Together, they helped the calf out. She felt a rush of pride and relief. For the first time, she realized that she could act decisively and effectively. The feeling of helping, of being useful and capable, strengthened her confidence and her trust in the rancher. The rancher also understood the importance of celebrating small victories. When she completed a task successfully, he offered a gentle smile, sometimes a word of praise. "Good work," he would say simply. At first, she barely acknowledged it, unsure she deserved it. But gradually, she began to accept the praise, letting herself feel proud. Every smile, every kind word became a thread weaving her back into the world from which she had been torn. Trust between them grew not just from words, but from consistent actions. She noticed that he kept his promises, never raised his voice, and never forced her into uncomfortable situations. That consistency was like a lifeline, teaching her that people could be dependable and that she could depend on someone without fear. It was a radical change from the chaos and betrayal she had experienced before. Even at night, the rancher ensured she felt safe. He placed her sleeping area near the main house, where she could hear familiar sounds and know she was protected. He respected her privacy, but was always within reach should she need help. For the first time in a long while, she slept without constant fear, allowing her mind and body to rest. These nights of calm reinforced the safety she was beginning to feel during the day. Over weeks, small gestures became rituals of trust and care. A shared meal, a quiet word, a gentle hand guiding her through a new task. All of these built a foundation for her to heal. Slowly, she started to smile more, speak more, and even joke lightly. She realized that life could be more than survival. It could be connection, learning, and even happiness. The rancher also learned from her. Her perspective, shaped by hardship and resilience, reminded him of the importance of patience and observation. He learned to notice small details, to adjust his approach based on her reactions, and to respect the depth of trauma that could exist in silence. In return, he offered her a model of stability and consistency, a bridge from the pain of her past to the possibility of a brighter future. By the end of the first month, she was no longer just a frightened, silent child. She had begun to reclaim her voice, her confidence, and her sense of agency. She still carried scars, both visible and invisible, but the rancher's patient guidance had created a space where she could begin to heal. Each day she became more herself, more capable, and more willing to engage with the world on her own terms. Though the journey was far from over, the first foundation had been laid. The girl now understood that she could trust, that she could learn, and that she could belong somewhere. The rancher, quietly observing her growth, knew that patience, respect, and small acts of care had the power to transform a life. And in the growing bond between them, both of them discovered something profound, that healing and hope often begin in the simplest, quietest ways. As the weeks turned into months, the girl began to discover a strength she had not realized she possessed. Life on the ranch, once overwhelming and frightening, became a place where she could begin to understand herself. Each sunrise brought new tasks, new lessons, and new chances to grow. Though the world outside could be harsh and unforgiving, the ranch offered her a sanctuary where she could slowly build confidence and feel capable. The rancher continued to guide her, always patient, always calm. He encouraged her to try more complicated tasks as she grew stronger and more skilled. She learned to help with the horses, to carry heavier buckets of water, and even to assist in mending fences. Every new skill gave her a sense of independence. She realized that she could do things on her own, that her hands were capable, and that her mind could solve problems even in difficult situations. One of the most important lessons she learned was the value of patience. Working with animals, especially horses and calves, required a gentle touch and a steady presence. At first, she had rushed, scared that mistakes would bring punishment or disappointment, but the rancher showed her that calmness and careful observation could achieve far more than fear ever could. Slowly, she learned to watch, wait, and respond in ways that brought success rather than harm. She began to take pride in her careful work, understanding that patience was a kind of power. Her confidence grew not just through work, but also through the quiet moments of connection. The rancher made sure to speak with her regularly, asking simple questions, sharing small stories, and listening to her responses. Though her voice was still soft and hesitant, she began to speak more freely. Each word she used, each sentence she completed, became a triumph over the silence that had once dominated her life. She realized that her thoughts and feelings mattered, that she could express them without fear, and that someone would listen with care. The girl also began to notice the rhythms of life on the ranch. She learned when the animals needed feeding, when the fields needed tending, and when storms were approaching. Understanding these patterns gave her a sense of control and security. She felt capable in ways she had never experienced before. Where she had once felt powerless, she now had knowledge and skills that allowed her to navigate her world with confidence. Social interactions with the rancher were equally transformative. He never rushed her, never demanded obedience, and never dismissed her feelings. When she struggled or made mistakes, he responded with patience and encouragement. When she succeeded, he celebrated with gentle words and small gestures. Over time, these consistent interactions built a deep sense of trust. She realized that people could be dependable, that kindness could be constant, and that she could rely on someone without fear. However, life outside the ranch still posed challenges. Occasionally, neighbors or travelers passed by, bringing with them the judgment and misunderstanding of a world that did not know her story. Sometimes they looked at her with suspicion, or they questioned why she was living there. At first, these encounters frightened her, reminding her of the cruelty she had experienced before. But the rancher stood by her side, quietly guiding her and shielding her when necessary. With his presence, she began to understand that she could face the outside world without losing the safety and trust she had gained. Through her growing independence, the girl began to form a sense of identity. She was no longer just a frightened child pulled from one place to another. She was learning who she could be: capable, thoughtful, and strong. She discovered that her voice mattered, that her actions could have positive outcomes, and that her feelings were valid. The small victories she experienced each day, feeding animals, completing chores, helping with tasks, became building blocks of a new self-image. Education also began to enter her life in small ways. The rancher, understanding the importance of knowledge, introduced her to reading and writing. At first, letters and words seemed confusing and distant, but with gentle instruction, she began to recognize letters and form simple words. Reading became another tool of independence, a way to understand the world beyond the ranch and to connect with ideas and stories she had never known. Each new word she mastered was a triumph, a proof that she could learn and grow despite the hardships of her past. Her growing confidence also affected the way she interacted with animals. She learned to approach them calmly, to understand their behaviors, and to predict their actions. A skittish horse would no longer startle her. A stray calf could be guided gently back to safety. These successes reinforced her sense of agency and strength. She began to see that the world was not only a place of danger but also a place where skill, patience, and understanding could create harmony. Friendship and emotional bonds deepened during this time. She began to develop a sense of belonging, both on the ranch and in the heart of the rancher. She understood that she was valued, that her presence was meaningful, and that her contributions mattered. In moments of doubt or fear, she could turn to him for guidance and support, and she began to internalize a sense of security that had been absent from her life for so long. Her laughter, once rare, began to return. Simple things, a bird landing nearby, a soft breeze through the trees, the sound of horses neighing, made her smile. These moments, small as they were, marked the healing of her spirit. She began to engage more with her surroundings, taking delight in learning and discovery. The ranch became not just a place of safety, but a place of joy and curiosity. Through her growing independence, she also learned about responsibility. She began to care for younger animals, tending to their needs and ensuring their safety. She understood that her actions had consequences, both good and bad, and she learned to act thoughtfully and deliberately. This sense of responsibility strengthened her character and gave her a deeper connection to the world around her. The rancher noticed how much she had grown. He saw the way she moved with purpose, spoke with increasing confidence, and approached challenges with determination. He knew that the foundation of trust, patience, and care he had built was taking root. She was becoming resilient, capable, and thoughtful. The hardships of her past were not forgotten, but they no longer defined her. Even as she grew stronger, he continued to provide support and guidance. He understood that growth was an ongoing process and that setbacks were natural. When she experienced fear, frustration, or doubt, he responded with calm reassurance. When she celebrated successes, he acknowledged them with pride and encouragement. Through this balance of guidance and autonomy, she learned that strength comes not only from ability, but also from trust, support, and perseverance. Over time, the girl began to envision a future for herself. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream beyond survival. She imagined learning new skills, exploring the world around her, and making choices for herself. These visions of the future gave her a sense of purpose and hope. They reinforced the lessons she had learned on the ranch, that life could be meaningful, that people could be trustworthy, and that she could shape her own destiny. Her journey was not complete, and challenges still remained. Memories of her past sometimes returned, bringing fear or sadness. Encounters with strangers could be unsettling. But the strength and confidence she had gained on the ranch gave her tools to face these moments. She had learned patience, observation, responsibility, and resilience. She had learned that trust could be built gradually and that kindness could create profound change. By the end of this period, she was no longer the frightened, silent child who had first arrived at the ranch. She was confident, capable, and beginning to understand the full extent of her potential. The rancher had not only provided safety and guidance, but had also shown her that she could reclaim her life, her voice, and her sense of self. Together they had built a foundation of trust, respect, and care that would carry her through future challenges. In these months of learning, work, and quiet connection, she discovered something vital. That belonging is not given, but created through relationships, understanding, and mutual respect. She realized that she had a place in the world, and that place was not defined by fear or cruelty, but by her own abilities, choices, and the support of those who truly cared. And so, with every passing day, she grew stronger, braver, and more certain of who she was. The ranch was no longer just a shelter. It was a place of growth, hope, and possibility. Through patience, kindness, and careful guidance, the rancher had helped her find the courage to reclaim her life, and she had begun to embrace the strength within herself. Though the journey ahead would continue to have challenges, she now faced it with resilience, confidence, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone. Time passed, and the girl had grown stronger in ways that went beyond the physical. Her hands, once trembling with fear, now moved with confidence and purpose. Her voice, once barely audible, now carried words full of meaning and emotion. Every step she took across the ranch was steady, sure, and aware. The small victories of daily life, feeding animals, helping with chores, speaking her thoughts, had accumulated into a foundation of strength she never thought she could have. The rancher watched these changes with quiet pride. He had never expected heroism or grand gestures. He had only believed in patience, kindness, and consistent care. And now, he could see the fruits of that belief in every glance, every action, and every small smile she shared. He had given her safety, guidance, and opportunity, but she had claimed her life back through courage, effort, and resilience. As she continued to learn and grow, she also began to explore her own identity more deeply. She remembered fragments of her past, faces, voices, and places, and carried them gently with her. These memories were no longer chains, but pieces of a story that had made her who she was. She realized that her past did not define her, but it had shaped her strength, compassion, and determination. The girl also began to dream more openly. She imagined learning beyond the ranch, discovering new places, and meeting new people. She imagined a life where she could make choices freely and pursue her interests. She understood that she had a right to her own future, and that the world, while imperfect, held opportunities for her to shape it with her own hands. These dreams gave her hope and direction, fueling her determination to continue growing and learning. Education became a central part of her life. The rancher encouraged her to read and write regularly, providing books and lessons tailored to her understanding. She devoured knowledge eagerly, discovering words and stories that expanded her mind and her perspective. Each page she read opened a new world of ideas, possibilities, and inspiration. Literacy was more than skill. It was freedom, a tool that allowed her to communicate, understand, and explore far beyond the boundaries of the ranch. Her relationship with the rancher deepened as well. Their bond was no longer only about trust or guidance. It had grown into mutual respect and genuine affection. They shared quiet moments watching sunsets, tending to animals, and discussing simple life lessons. Through these shared experiences, she realized that love and care could be steady, consistent, and selfless. She understood that a connection built on respect and kindness could survive challenges and endure over time. The rancher, in turn, learned from her resilience and perspective. He had guided her, but she had also shown him the power of patience, observation, and unwavering courage. Her strength reminded him of the importance of hope and the profound impact that one person's dedication can have on another's life. Together, they had created a partnership of mutual growth, learning, and support. Community life on the ranch also became part of her growth. Occasionally, neighbors and travelers visited, curious about the girl who had arrived so timid and fearful. At first, she shied away, unsure how to face others. But with time, she learned to navigate social situations with confidence. She discovered that she could engage with people without fear, that her presence mattered, and that she could participate fully in the life around her. Each successful interaction strengthened her sense of belonging and self-worth. Her independence continued to grow. She was able to perform complex tasks, manage responsibilities, and make decisions without constant supervision. The rancher allowed her to lead small projects, guide younger helpers, and take initiative in daily routines. These opportunities reinforced her skills, judgment, and confidence. She realized that she was capable of achieving much more than she had ever imagined, and that her abilities could make a real difference in the world around her. Alongside independence, she nurtured compassion and care for others. She learned to guide and teach younger children or newcomers, sharing the patience and guidance she had received. She began to understand the importance of giving back, of supporting those who were vulnerable or in need. Through these actions, she discovered a sense of purpose and fulfillment that extended beyond her own growth. Helping others strengthened her sense of identity and her understanding of what it meant to be truly human. The girl also began to plan for the long-term future. She thought about where she wanted to live, what skills she wanted to develop, and how she could continue to grow in knowledge and character. She realized that life could be shaped intentionally, not just endured. For the first time, she felt in control of her own destiny, able to make choices that aligned with her dreams and values. This sense of empowerment was transformative, allowing her to embrace her life fully and confidently. She also began to explore creative pursuits. Drawing, storytelling, and observing nature became ways for her to express her thoughts and emotions. She wrote short stories inspired by animals on the ranch, created drawings of landscapes and plants, and shared small poems with the rancher. These creative outlets allowed her to process emotions, celebrate beauty, and communicate in ways that words alone sometimes could not capture. Creativity became a form of healing, self-expression, and joy. Over time, her relationship with the land grew deep and meaningful. She learned the cycles of seasons, the habits of animals, and the rhythms of daily life. Nature became both teacher and companion, offering lessons in patience, observation, and resilience. The land was no longer intimidating or foreign. It was a source of knowledge, comfort, and stability. She understood that caring for the land was also caring for herself, that connection with nature could nurture both body and spirit. The rancher watched these transformations with quiet satisfaction. He had not expected such rapid change, yet he had always believed in the girl's potential. He marveled at her courage, her curiosity, and her willingness to grow despite her past. He realized that what they had created together, trust, safety, guidance, and opportunity, had allowed her to become someone remarkable. She had reclaimed her life not only through his support, but also through her own determination, resilience, and strength. One day, she was able to complete a task entirely on her own, managing the care of a group of young calves without guidance. She moved confidently, giving instructions to helpers, checking the animals carefully, and solving small problems as they arose. The rancher watched from a distance, feeling a mixture of pride and admiration. He knew that this moment symbolized much more than a simple chore. It symbolized her journey from fear to strength, from silence to confidence, and from vulnerability to independence. Through all these experiences, she began to understand the deeper meaning of freedom. It was not just about escaping danger or living safely. It was about making choices, expressing herself, learning, and contributing. Freedom meant knowing that her voice mattered, that her actions could have positive impact, and that she could navigate the world with confidence and care. She understood that she was no longer defined by her past, but by her present actions and future possibilities. Her life on the ranch became a balance of work, learning, creativity, and reflection. Each day brought new challenges and new opportunities for growth. She continued to face fears, solve problems, and build skills, but she did so with confidence, patience, and the knowledge that she was capable. She had learned to trust herself as much as she had learned to trust the rancher. This balance of self-trust and support was a key part of her transformation. The girl also began to share her story in small ways. She spoke to the rancher about her memories, her fears, and her dreams. She allowed herself to express emotions she had long kept hidden. Each time she spoke, she reclaimed a piece of herself that had been lost to fear and trauma. She discovered that speaking her truth could bring relief, connection, and understanding. Her voice, once barely heard, became a tool for healing and empowerment. Through all these experiences, she came to understand that life could be meaningful even after hardship. She had survived fear, loneliness, and uncertainty, but she had also discovered hope, strength, and joy. She had learned that kindness, patience, and support could transform lives. She had learned that she could be brave, resilient, and capable. And she had learned that her future was hers to shape, not dictated by the past or by the cruelty of others. Finally, the girl recognized that she had truly reclaimed her life. She was no longer a silent, frightened child, lost in the chaos of a harsh world. She was a young woman with skills, confidence, knowledge, and purpose. She had a voice, a place to belong, and the freedom to dream. The rancher, who had quietly guided her with patience and care, had been a bridge to this new life. But it was her courage, resilience, and determination that had allowed her to cross it fully. As she stood on the hill overlooking the ranch, feeling the wind on her face and the warmth of the sun, she realized she had found more than safety. She had found strength. She had found trust. She had found a life that she could shape with her own hands. And in that moment she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, fully herself, fully free, and fully alive.